Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling smaller than before? Not because someone yelled at you, not because someone threatened you, but because somehow they got inside your head. They made you question yourself, your decisions, your worth, your reality. And by the time the conversation ended, you were carrying guilt that wasn't yours, apologizing for things you didn't do, and doubting things you knew were true. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Millions of people spend their entire lives trapped inside invisible prisons, built by manipulation, emotional control, toxic relationships, and the desperate need to be accepted. The frightening part? Most victims don't even realize it's happening, because the strongest chains are the ones you cannot see. Maybe someone constantly makes you feel responsible for their happiness. Maybe they use guilt to control your choices. Maybe they play the victim whenever you set boundaries. Or maybe you've spent years trying to earn approval from people who never intended to give it. And every time you try harder, you lose a little more of yourself. But what if I told you that the people who manipulate others are not using some secret power? What if their power comes from something much simpler? Something hidden inside you. Something Carl Jung spent decades trying to help humanity understand. Jung believed that much of human suffering comes from what remains unconscious. The parts of ourselves we refuse to see. The fears we hide. The wounds we deny. The truths we avoid. And according to Jung, the moment those hidden parts become visible, something extraordinary happens. The game changes. Because manipulation only works in darkness. Control only works when you don't know yourself. Emotional attacks only succeed when they find an unguarded wound. The people who seem impossible to manipulate are not stronger than everyone else. They're not colder. They're not emotionless. They're not heartless. They simply know themselves. Deeply, completely, and because of that, they cannot be controlled by the fears that control everyone else. Think about it. Why does criticism destroy one person, but barely affect another? Why can one rejection shatter someone's confidence, while another person moves forward without hesitation? Why do some people become trapped in toxic cycles for years, while others recognize the danger almost immediately? Carl Jung believed the answer lies within. Not in the manipulator. Not in society. Not in luck. Within you. The truth is, every manipulation tactic depends on finding something inside you that is still seeking validation, still carrying unresolved pain, still afraid of abandonment, rejection, conflict, or loneliness. And when someone discovers that weakness, they pull the strings, without you even noticing. But today, we're going to begin dismantling those strings, not through anger, not through revenge, not through becoming cold or cynical, but through awareness. Because awareness is where freedom begins. Over the next 5 powerful shifts, you'll discover why approval is one of the biggest traps in human psychology. You'll learn how to recognize hidden motives behind people's actions. You'll uncover the shadow that Carl Jung believed most people spend their lives avoiding. You'll understand why emotional reactions give manipulators their power. And ultimately, you'll witness the birth of a version of yourself that no longer bends under pressure, no longer breaks under criticism, and no longer surrenders their identity to gain acceptance. A version of yourself that cannot be controlled because it finally understands itself. But before any of that can happen, there is one painful truth you must face. A truth that Carl Jung understood better than most. The people controlling your life may not be controlling you because they are powerful. They may be controlling you because you are still asking them for permission to be yourself. And the moment that need disappears, everything changes. Let's begin with the first shift. The moment you stop needing approval. Shift 1. The moment you stop needing approval there is a question that most people never ask themselves. Not because it is difficult, but because the answer is uncomfortable. Here it is. How much of your life is actually yours? Think about it for a moment. How many choices have you made because they felt right to you? And how many were made because you wanted someone else's approval? Maybe you chose a career because your family respected it. Maybe you stayed silent because you didn't want people to dislike you. Maybe you stayed in a relationship long after it became unhealthy, because the thought of being rejected felt unbearable. Maybe you've spent years trying to prove your value to people who already decided they would never appreciate you. Most people don't notice this pattern. They think they're making independent choices. But beneath the surface, an invisible force is guiding them. A force Carl Jung understood deeply. The need for approval. At first, approval seems harmless. Who doesn't want to be liked? Who doesn't want acceptance? Who doesn't want to feel valued? These desires are natural. Human beings are social creatures. We all want connection. We all want belonging. But there is a dangerous line. A line few people recognize. The moment approval becomes a need instead of a preference. That is where manipulation begins. Because the person who needs approval can always be controlled by the person who gives it. Think about that. If someone controls your sense of worth, they control your emotions. If they control your emotions, they influence your decisions. And if they influence your decisions, they influence your life. Many people spend decades trapped in this cycle. Working harder, explaining themselves more, trying to be nicer, trying to prove their goodness, trying to earn acceptance. Yet somehow, the acceptance never arrives. Why? Because approval is often used as bait. The promise of acceptance becomes the hook. And people spend years chasing it. Carl Jung observed that much of human behavior comes from unconscious desires. Many adults are still seeking emotional validation they never received in childhood. Without realizing it, they search for someone to finally tell them, "You are enough. You are worthy. You matter." The tragedy is that this search makes them vulnerable. Imagine a young man named Daniel. Daniel works hard. He is kind, helpful, reliable. He does everything people ask. He says yes when he wants to say no. He avoids conflict. He sacrifices his own needs. Everyone describes him as a great person. Yet Daniel feels exhausted, invisible, resentful, because no matter how much he gives, it never feels like enough. Every compliment gives him temporary relief. Every criticism destroys him. His emotional state depends entirely on other people's opinions, and that dependency becomes his weakness. One day a co-worker begins taking advantage of him. Extra work, extra responsibilities, last-minute favors. Daniel knows it isn't fair, but he agrees anyway. Why? Because deep down he fears disapproval more than exploitation. This is how manipulation often works. Not through force, but through emotional dependency. The manipulator doesn't need to overpower you. They only need to understand what you're afraid of losing. Approval, acceptance, validation, status, belonging. Once they know that, the strings become visible. Carl Jung believed that psychological freedom begins when unconscious patterns become conscious. You cannot break a chain you cannot see. So ask yourself honestly, how often do you silence your truth to keep others comfortable? How often do you change your personality depending on who you're around? How often do you explain yourself to people who have no intention of understanding you? How often do you seek permission to exist as yourself? These questions are uncomfortable, But they reveal something important. Many people are not living. They are performing. Performing for family. Performing for friends. Performing for society. Performing for strangers online. Performing for anyone whose approval feels valuable. And the longer the performance continues, the further they drift from themselves. Jung warned about this. He described how people create social masks. Masks designed to gain acceptance. Masks designed to fit expectations. Masks designed to avoid rejection. The problem isn't the mask itself. The problem is forgetting who you are underneath it. Because eventually you wake up and realize something frightening. Everyone likes the character, but nobody knows the real you, including yourself. And that realization hurts. It hurts because the approval you've spent years chasing suddenly feels empty. Because approval earned through performance is fragile. You must constantly maintain it, protect it, feed it, defend it. One mistake, one disagreement, one unpopular opinion, and it disappears. This is why people become trapped. They build their identity on external validation, and external validation can always be taken away. But something incredible happens when a person begins waking up. Not all at once. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. They begin noticing patterns. They notice how often they seek reassurance. They notice how often fear drives their decisions. They notice how much energy they spend managing other people's perceptions. And eventually they ask a life-changing question. What if I stopped trying to convince everyone? What if I stopped chasing approval? What if I stopped explaining myself? For many people, this question feels terrifying. Because approval addiction behaves like any other addiction. The thought of losing it creates anxiety. You imagine criticism, judgment, rejection, isolation. But something surprising happens. The moment you stop desperately seeking approval, you begin discovering who you really are. And that discovery changes everything. You start saying no without guilt. You start expressing opinions without apologizing. You stop over-explaining your choices. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop begging people to see your value. Because you finally understand something Carl Jung spent his life teaching. Worth is not granted by other people. It is recognized within yourself. The manipulator loses power the moment you no longer need their approval. Think about a puppet. A puppet moves because strings control it. Cut the strings. The puppet stops responding. The same thing happens psychologically. When approval is the string, freedom comes from cutting it. Not from becoming arrogant. Not from becoming selfish. Not from rejecting all relationships. But from understanding that your value exists whether people approve of you or not. That realization is powerful. Because people can only weaponize what you desperately need. If you desperately need praise, praise controls you. If you desperately need acceptance, acceptance controls you. If you desperately need validation, validation controls you. But when your self-worth comes from within, the game changes. Now criticism becomes information instead of devastation. Now rejection becomes redirection instead of destruction. Now disagreement becomes normal instead of terrifying. Now manipulation struggles to find a place to attach itself. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means you become stronger. There is a difference. Carl Jung called this process individuation. The journey toward becoming your authentic self. Not the self others expect. Not the self society rewards. Not the self fear creates. The real self. The self beneath the masks. The self beneath the performances. The self beneath the endless search for approval. And this journey requires courage. Because some people will dislike the new version of you. Not because you've changed for the worse, but because they benefited from the old version. The version that never said no. The version that always complied. The version that sacrificed itself for acceptance. The version that could be controlled. When that version disappears, some relationships become uncomfortable. Some people become angry. Some people become distant. Some people suddenly accuse you of being selfish. But look closely. Sometimes, the people most upset by your boundaries were the ones benefiting from your lack of them. This is a truth many people discover too late. The moment you stop needing approval, you begin seeing relationships more clearly. You begin recognizing who values you and who only values access to you. Who respects you and who only respects your obedience. Who supports your growth and who prefers your dependence. That clarity is priceless. Because manipulation thrives in confusion. Awareness destroys confusion. And awareness is exactly what Carl Jung wanted people to develop. The ability to observe themselves honestly, to see their fears clearly, to understand their unconscious motivations, to become conscious enough that nobody else can secretly control them. Perhaps this is where your transformation begins. Not with changing other people, not with winning arguments, not with proving yourself, but with releasing the exhausting need to be approved by everyone. Because the moment you stop seeking permission to be yourself, you become dangerous to manipulation. You become difficult to control. You become emotionally independent. And this is only the beginning. Because once approval loses its grip on you, another shocking realization appears. You begin noticing something most people never see. You start seeing the hidden motives behind human behavior. And when that happens, manipulation becomes much easier to recognize. Because people are rarely driven by the reasons they claim. Their words tell one story. Their unconscious motives tell another. Carl Jung believed understanding this hidden layer changes everything. And once you learn to see it, you will never look at people the same way again. Let's move to the next shift. Shift 2. Seeing the hidden motives behind people's behavior. The moment you stop needing approval, something strange begins to happen. You start seeing people differently. Not because they changed, because you did. For most of your life, you probably listened to what people said. But Carl Jung believed that human beings are often driven by forces they don't fully understand themselves. In other words, people rarely reveal their true motives. Sometimes they can't. Sometimes they don't even know them. This is where manipulation becomes difficult to detect. Because manipulation almost never arrives wearing a mask that says, "I want to control you." Instead, it arrives disguised as concern, disguised as advice, disguised as friendship, disguised as love. Imagine someone constantly discouraging your dreams. Whenever you talk about a new opportunity, they immediately point out the risks, the reasons it won't work, the reasons you're not ready. At first, it sounds like concern, but over time, a question emerges. Are they protecting you or protecting themselves? Carl Jung observed that people often project their own fears onto others. Someone who is afraid to take risks may convince you not to take risks. Someone who secretly feels insecure may constantly criticize you. Someone who fears being left behind may try to keep you small. The frightening part is that they may not even realize they're doing it. Their unconscious fears become your limitations, and if you're unaware, you accept them as truth. This is why self-awareness is so powerful. When you understand yourself, you stop blindly accepting other people's opinions. You start asking deeper questions. Why is this person saying this? What emotion is driving their behavior? What need are they trying to satisfy? What fear are they trying to avoid? Suddenly, hidden patterns appear everywhere. The coworker who constantly puts others down. The friend who becomes uncomfortable when you succeed. The partner who creates guilt whenever you become more independent. the family member who criticizes every major decision you make. On the surface, these behaviors seem unrelated, but beneath them often lies the same thing. Fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of feeling insignificant. Fear of change. Fear of being left behind. Carl Jung believed that much of human behavior is shaped by unconscious fears and desires. Once you understand this, you stop taking everything personally. This is one of the greatest psychological freedoms a person can experience. Because when someone attacks you, it may reveal more about them than about you. When someone constantly judges you, it may reveal their own inner conflict. When someone tries to control you, it may reveal their insecurity. Suddenly, manipulation loses some of its power. Why? Because awareness breaks the spell. The magician's trick only works until you see how it's done. Then you can never unsee it. And this realization changes everything. You become calmer, more observant, less reactive. You stop getting pulled into every emotional game. You stop defending yourself against every accusation. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, you watch, you listen, you observe. And the more you observe, the more you realize something profound. The greatest manipulators are often manipulating themselves first. They are acting out unconscious wounds they have never confronted. But Carl Jung warned that recognizing darkness in others is only half the journey. Because there is another darkness, a hidden part within yourself. A part most people spend their entire lives avoiding. A part that secretly influences their decisions, emotions, fears, and relationships. Jung called it the shadow. And once you meet it, you become far more powerful than anyone trying to control you. Let's move to the next shift. Shift 3. Understanding a end. Integrating your shadow. Carl Jung once suggested something that most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. The traits you fear most may not exist in other people. They may exist within you. Not because you're evil, not because you're broken, but because every human being has a hidden side, a shadow. And until you understand it, you will remain vulnerable to manipulation. This is where the journey becomes uncomfortable. Because it's easy to see flaws in others, it's much harder to see them in ourselves. Think about it. Have you ever met someone who constantly lies? Someone arrogant, controlling, selfish, and instantly felt intense anger toward them? Sometimes that reaction is justified. But Jung believed that strong emotional reactions often reveal something deeper. They reveal parts of ourselves we have rejected, parts we don't want to acknowledge, parts we push into the darkness. The shadow is not just your anger, it is your unused strength. Not just your selfishness, it is your ability to protect yourself. Not just your aggression, it is your ability to fight for what matters. Many people were taught from childhood to reject these parts. Don't be angry, don't be selfish, don't be difficult, don't upset people. So they become overly agreeable, overly passive, overly accommodating. And while they appear kind on the surface, something dangerous is happening underneath. They are losing access to their power. Carl Jung understood this. He knew that what we suppress does not disappear. It goes underground. And from there, it influences our behavior without our awareness. A person who suppresses anger may become secretly resentful. A person who suppresses confidence may become insecure. A person who suppresses strength may attract people who take advantage of them. This is why shadow work matters. Because what remains unconscious controls you. What becomes conscious can be transformed. Imagine a woman named Sarah. For years, Sarah prided herself on being nice. She never argued, never challenged anyone, never set strong boundaries. Everyone described her as sweet. Yet she kept finding herself in relationships where people used her, ignored her needs, took advantage of her generosity. She couldn't understand why. Then one day, she realized something. She wasn't expressing kindness. She was expressing fear. Fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of disappointing people. The moment she saw this truth, everything changed. Not overnight, but gradually. She learned to say no. She learned to disagree. She learned that being kind does not mean being weak. That was shadow integration. Not becoming a different person, becoming a whole person. This is what many manipulators rely on. Your disowned qualities. They count on you being unable to access your strength, unable to access your confidence, unable to access your anger when boundaries are violated. Because a person disconnected from their shadow becomes predictable, easy to guilt, easy to pressure, easy to control. But the moment you integrate your shadow, you become balanced. You can be compassionate without being naive. You can be generous without being exploited. You can be understanding without tolerating disrespect. And people feel that difference immediately. Not because you become louder, but because you become real, authentic, grounded, difficult to intimidate. Carl Jung believed that true maturity comes when a person stops pretending to be only good. Because nobody is only good. Nobody is only light. Every human being contains both light and darkness, strength and vulnerability, love and anger, confidence and fear. The goal is not to eliminate the darkness. The goal is to understand it. Because what you understand no longer controls you, and what you accept no longer needs to hide. This is where manipulation begins to lose its grip completely, because manipulators often exploit what you refuse to face. If you fear conflict, they use conflict. If you fear rejection, they use rejection. If you fear criticism, they use criticism. But when you confront those fears, the weapons stop working, and suddenly, something powerful emerges. A version of yourself that is no longer running from its own darkness. A version that knows exactly who it is. But there is still one final weakness manipulators depend on. An emotional doorway they use to gain access to your mind. Most people never realize it's there. Yet it controls their decisions every day. And until that doorway is closed, true freedom remains impossible. Carl Jung believed mastering your emotions is one of the final steps toward psychological independence. And in the next shift, you'll discover how emotionally strong people become almost impossible to manipulate. Let's move to the next shift. Shift 4. Becoming emotionally unavailable to manipulation. There is one thing every manipulator wants from you. Not your money. Not your time. Not even your attention. They want your emotional reaction, because the moment they control your emotions, they begin influencing your behavior. Think about the last time someone upset you. Maybe they criticized you, ignored you, rejected you, or said something unfair. What happened next? Did you replay the conversation in your head for hours? Did you imagine arguments? Did you feel angry, hurt, or anxious? If so, you're human. But Carl Jung understood something most people never realize. The event itself is rarely what controls us. Our reaction to the event does. And that reaction often comes from unconscious wounds. A manipulator understands this instinctively. They know exactly which buttons to press. The guilt button, the fear button, the shame button, the insecurity button. And once they find the right button, they keep pressing it. Again, and again, and again. Until you're no longer responding consciously. You're reacting automatically. This is where people lose their power. Not because they are weak, but because they become emotionally predictable. The manipulator learns, if I criticize them, they'll defend themselves. If I withdraw affection, they'll chase me. If I create guilt, they'll give in. If I act offended, they'll apologize. The pattern becomes a script, and the script becomes control. Carl Jung believed psychological maturity begins when a person becomes conscious of these automatic reactions. Because awareness creates a pause, and inside that pause exists freedom. Imagine someone insults you. The old version of you reacts instantly. Anger, defensiveness, explanation. The new version pauses, observes, reflects. Instead of asking, how do I respond? They ask, why am I reacting? That single question changes everything. Because now you're looking inward instead of outward. You're examining the wound instead of fighting the trigger. This is emotional mastery. Not suppressing emotions. Understanding them. Many people misunderstand emotional strength. They think emotionally strong people don't feel pain. They do. They feel disappointment, rejection, betrayal, loss, just like everyone else. The difference is that they don't surrender control of their actions to those emotions. They experience the feeling without becoming the feeling. Carl Jung often emphasized the importance of becoming conscious, and nowhere is this more important than during emotional conflict. Because when emotions become overwhelming, awareness disappears. And when awareness disappears, manipulation becomes easy. Think about guilt, one of the most powerful tools of control. Someone says, after everything I've done for you. Suddenly, guilt appears. You begin questioning yourself. Maybe they're right. Maybe you're selfish. Maybe you're wrong. But emotionally mature people pause. They examine the situation. They separate facts from feelings. And because they do, guilt loses its power. The same thing happens with fear. Many people stay trapped in toxic situations because they fear what might happen if they leave. Fear becomes the cage. But Jung believed growth often begins where comfort ends. The moment you stop allowing fear to make decisions for you, your entire life starts changing. Then there is rejection. Perhaps the greatest weapon of all. Most people fear rejection because they connect it to worth. If someone rejects them, they assume they are not enough. But emotionally independent people understand something different. Rejection is not always a judgment. Sometimes it's simply incompatibility. Sometimes it's timing. Sometimes it's another person's limitation. And sometimes it is life's way of redirecting you. This understanding creates incredible freedom, because the fear of rejection is what keeps many people obedient, silent, small, manipulatable. The moment rejection stops terrifying you, a huge amount of control disappears. You stop seeking constant reassurance. You stop chasing people who pull away. You stop abandoning yourself to keep others close. And perhaps most importantly, you stop negotiating your self-respect. Carl Jung believed that the goal of psychological growth was not perfection, it was wholeness. And a whole person cannot be easily manipulated. Why? Because they know their strengths. They know their weaknesses. They know their fears. They know their wounds. And because they know them, nobody else can secretly use them. This is why emotionally mature people appear calm under pressure. Not because nothing affects them. Because they understand themselves. When someone tries to provoke them, they notice. When someone tries to guilt them, they notice. When someone tries to shame them, they notice. Awareness interrupts the pattern. And without the pattern, manipulation struggles to survive. Eventually, a remarkable transformation occurs. You stop feeling the need to win every argument. You stop proving yourself to everyone. You stop reacting to every criticism. You stop explaining your value. Your energy becomes protected. Your emotions become grounded. Your mind becomes clear. And people notice. Some respect it. Some admire it. Some become uncomfortable because their old tactics no longer work. But that's exactly the point. Because emotional freedom was never about changing other people. It was about becoming impossible for them to control. Yet there is one final transformation left. The most important one. The transformation Carl Jung believed represented the highest stage of psychological development. A moment when the masks fall away. The fears lose their authority. The shadow becomes integrated. And a new identity emerges. An identity built not on approval, fear, or emotional dependence, but on self-knowledge. This is the birth of the unbreakable self. And once it arrives, nobody can manipulate, control, or hurt you in the same way again. Let's move to the final shift. Shift 5. The birth of the unbreakable self. There comes a moment in every transformation that feels almost unreal. Not because the world changes, but because you do. The people are the same. The challenges are the same. The criticism is the same. The manipulation attempts are the same. Yet somehow, they no longer affect you the way they once did. This is the moment Carl Jung spent much of his life trying to help people reach. The moment you stop living as a fragmented person. The moment you become whole. Think back to where this journey began. You were seeking approval, afraid of rejection, affected by every opinion, pulled in different directions by different people, trying to keep everyone happy, trying to avoid conflict, trying to earn worth from the outside world. And because of that, your emotions were available to anyone who knew how to use them. But now, something is different. You no longer need everyone's approval. You see hidden motives more clearly. You understand your shadow instead of running from it. You recognize emotional manipulation before it takes hold. Piece by piece, the chains have fallen away. And in their place, something powerful has emerged. Your true self. Not the version created by fear. Not the version created by expectations. Not the version created by wounds. The real one. Carl Jung called this process individuation. The lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are. And here is what makes this stage so powerful. The unbreakable self is not fearless. It simply refuses to be ruled by fear. The unbreakable self is not emotionless. It simply refuses to be controlled by emotion. The unbreakable self is not perfect. It simply accepts its imperfections. This is a crucial difference, because many people spend their lives chasing perfection. Jung believed wholeness matters more. Wholeness means accepting every part of yourself. Your strengths, your flaws, your confidence, your insecurity, your light, your shadow. When you stop fighting yourself, something extraordinary happens. You become internally stable, and internal stability is something manipulation cannot easily penetrate. Imagine someone criticizes you. The old version immediately doubts itself. The unbreakable self listens calmly. If the criticism is true, it learns. If the criticism is false, it moves on. Imagine someone rejects you. The old version feels worthless. The unbreakable self understands that another person's decision does not define its value. Imagine someone tries to guilt you. The old version caves in. The unbreakable self evaluates the situation honestly and responds from principle rather than pressure. Can you see the difference? The event is the same. The person is different. This is why true power is internal. Most people search for power in money, status, attention, influence, control, but Carl Jung pointed toward a deeper form of power. Self-mastery. Because the person who masters themselves cannot easily be mastered by others. This is why some people seem calm in chaos, why some people remain strong during betrayal, why some people continue moving forward despite criticism. It is not because life is easier for them. It is because they have built something within themselves that cannot be taken away. A strong inner foundation. And perhaps this is the greatest lesson of all. You will still experience disappointment. You will still encounter toxic people. You will still face rejection. You will still be misunderstood. But these things will no longer define you, because your identity no longer depends on them. Your worth no longer depends on them. Your peace no longer depends on them. That is freedom. Real freedom. Not freedom from life's challenges, freedom from being controlled by them. And once you reach this point, something unexpected happens. You stop trying to prove yourself. You stop chasing validation. You stop fighting battles that do not matter. You stop seeking revenge. You stop needing everyone to understand you. Instead, your energy turns inward, toward growth, toward purpose, toward becoming more fully yourself. Carl Jung believed that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who others expect you to be, not who fear tells you to be, not who your wounds force you to be, but who you genuinely are beneath all of it. And perhaps that is what this entire journey has been about. Not learning how to defeat manipulators, not learning how to control others, but learning how to reclaim yourself. Because when you truly know yourself, manipulation loses its target, control loses its grip, fear loses its authority, and the people who once had power over your emotions discover something surprising. The person they once controlled no longer exists. In their place stands someone stronger, someone wiser, someone awake, someone who understands that self-respect is more valuable than approval, that awareness is more powerful than fear, and that inner peace is worth more than external validation. So if there is one message to remember from Carl Jung, let it be this: the greatest prison is unconsciousness, and the greatest freedom is self-knowledge. The moment you truly understand yourself, you stop becoming a victim of forces you cannot see. You become conscious. You become whole. You become free. And from that day forward, people may still judge you. They may still criticize you. They may still try to manipulate you. But they will never again have access to the part of you that once surrendered its power, because that version of you is gone. And what remains is something far stronger. An individual who knows themselves, trusts themselves, respects themselves, and walks through the world with a quiet strength that cannot be shaken. Nobody can manipulate, control, or hurt you in the same way again, because you finally discovered the power that was inside you all along. And so, the journey comes full circle. What began as a search for protection became something much greater. A journey into yourself. You learned that manipulation survives on your need for approval. You learned that people often reveal their hidden motives through their behavior. You learned that the shadow you feared may contain the very strength you've been searching for. You learned that emotional mastery is not about suppressing feelings, but understanding them. And finally, you witnessed the birth of something most people never experience. The birth of the unbreakable self. Carl Jung believed that the greatest transformation does not happen when you change the world around you. It happens when you become conscious of the world within you. Because the moment you understand yourself, everything changes. The insults lose their poison. The rejection loses its sting. The manipulation loses its power. The fear loses its authority. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become stronger. For years, you may have believed your greatest enemies were outside of you. The toxic people, the critics, the manipulators, the betrayers. But Jung understood a deeper truth. The greatest battle has always been within. The battle between awareness and unconsciousness, between authenticity and performance, between who you truly are and who you've been taught to be. And every step of this journey has brought you closer to the same realization. The power you were seeking was never in another person's approval. It was never in their acceptance. It was never in their validation. It was always within you. Hidden beneath fear, hidden beneath doubt, hidden beneath old wounds and forgotten beliefs, waiting to be discovered. Think about the person you were at the beginning of this video. The person afraid of being rejected, afraid of disappointing others, afraid of standing alone. Now think about the person you are becoming. Someone who understands their own mind, someone who trusts their own judgment, someone who can walk away from manipulation without guilt, someone who can face criticism without collapsing, someone who no longer abandons themselves to keep others comfortable. That is real power. Quiet power. Invisible power. The kind of power that doesn't need to dominate others because it has already mastered itself. And perhaps this is Carl Jung's most important lesson of all. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But now, you can see, you can understand, you can choose. And that changes everything. So the next time someone tries to manipulate you, pause, remember who you are. The next time someone tries to control you through fear, pause, remember what you've learned. The next time someone tries to make you doubt your worth, pause, remember that your value was never theirs to give. And never theirs to take away. Because from this moment forward, you carry something they cannot touch. Self-awareness, self-respect, self-mastery. The foundation of an unbreakable life. Stand tall, trust yourself, walk your path, and never shrink yourself again to fit inside someone else's expectations. The world may try to shape you. People may try to define you. But a person who truly knows themselves becomes impossible to control, impossible to deceive, and almost impossible to break. This is your awakening. This is your transformation. This is your freedom. And the moment you fully embrace it, nobody can manipulate, control, or hurt you again in the way they once could. Because the strongest person in the room is not the loudest, not the richest, not the most feared. The strongest person in the room is the one who has faced themselves and emerged whole. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, don't let it end here. Write "I choose myself" in the comments below. Not for me, for you. Because sometimes a single decision can mark the beginning of an entirely new life. And today, that decision is choosing yourself over fear, choosing awareness over manipulation, choosing self-respect over approval, and choosing growth over comfort. If you found value in this video, take a moment to like it and subscribe to the channel. Because every week, we explore the timeless wisdom of Carl Jung, psychology, self-mastery, and the hidden truths that help you become mentally stronger, emotionally free, and impossible to control. And if you know someone who is trapped in a toxic relationship, struggling with manipulation, or losing themselves trying to please everyone, share this video with them. It might be the message they need to hear right now. Remember, the day you truly know yourself is the day the world loses its power to define you. Until next time, stay aware, stay strong, and never surrender your mind to anyone.